Hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode of the In Conversation podcast. I'm your host, James Campbell, and today's episode is going to be a really special one because I'm joined by one of our contributors from Intellect's seminal Handbook of Adult Film and Media. Huang, welcome to the podcast. It's wonderful to have you on. How's things going today?
Things are going really well. Thank you so much for having me this afternoon, James.
Brilliant. And I know that you contributed a chapter on gay pornography, but before we jump into that, I just wanted to give people a little bit of an overview so they understand what the handbook is, because it's part of a new series of handbooks that Intellect's been publishing. Other titles include documentary. We've got one on dance. We have one on popular music methodologies. But sort of adult film and media is one we've all been looking forward to, and then very glad that it was just published recently in January, and is already really building a lot of critical reception and getting a lot of feedback. So really glad that we could have you on today. But in general, I guess you could say that the handbook is more of a survey of the state of the discipline, and that takes the form of many themed chapters, including yours, of course. And I love the array of different chapters, content, themes that are being covered here. But each definitely presents kind of an overview of the primary literature, important histories, perhaps essential arguments. And I guess overall, you could say it's a reference work with a lot of different resources that would be great for emerging scholars, but also for researchers and people who have been working and teaching within the field, or of course in adjacent fields, just film, media, gender or sexuality studies. So really excited to have the book on the shelves, and very excited to have you joining us today. So without further ado, perhaps you could just start by telling us a little bit about where you're based, what your kind of main research interests are, and then just if you teach or what your kind of role is.
Sure, I'll be happy to. I'm Nguyen Tan Hoang. I am Associate Professor of Literature and Cultural Studies at the University of California at San Diego. So my areas of research and teaching include queer cinema, Asian American film and visual studies. I also teach experimental and avant-garde cinema, as well as I guess this emerging field called videographic criticism. So there's a practice component to my scholarship as well.
Excellent. Well, thank you very much for sharing that. And I know many of our listeners might be familiar with you already because you have some really important contributions to the field already. So I wanted to, kind of ask you a little bit about some of those. And let's start with A View from the Bottom, which has become a foundational text in queer media studies. How did that earlier work kind of shape, I guess, your thinking about pornography as a serious object of scholarly inquiry? And yeah, just tell us a little bit about that project as well.
Sure. First of all, thank you so much for calling it a foundational text. Yeah, that's very sweet of you. But okay, yeah, I'd love to talk about A View from the Bottom any chance I get. So in that text, which started out as a dissertation at UC Berkeley when I was a graduate student, I only wrote one chapter on pornography, and that's on the work of gay Asian American porn star Brandon Lee. Uh, it was actually the first publication that I, got a chance to publish in 2004, and it came out of, a porn seminar with my advisor Linda Williams, a huge figure in porn studies. So yes, even though it was only one chapter in, let's say, I think I had 4 or 5 chapters in the dissertation and then in the book, it was very much the genesis of my argument, around gay Asian American masculinity and all this concept I call bottomhood. Um, so talking about this, uh, Gaysian porn actor allows me, to come up with this, with this thesis about bottomhood as something that is, a racially abject position, but also something that can be recuperated and reclaimed as a position of power, as a position of something that is chosen, that is joyful, that is ecstatic, that is pleasurable. So I think, what emerges out of, my, study of this figure named Brandon Lee is, pornography is a genre that allows us to look at, these big issues such as race, gender, class, nationality in a really, sort of like honest, I guess, honest manner. Like it's there's no euphemism. Like okay, I want to fuck you because you're a hot, I don't know, construction
Yeah.
worker. Hot white working class construction worker. Yeah. So in that sense, I think porn really cuts through a lot of the I don't know, window dressing or euphemism or double speak that we have in everyday life. Yeah. So in that sense, pornography allows, has been very productive, right? Enables me to, sort of theorize, Asian American masculinity as something that is, objective, but also something that is, joyful and allows, subjects to have agency as well.
That's great. Thank you very much. I did really want to kind of talk a little bit about that early work and maybe how that's led into where you are now. Because I know, of course, the thing with these handbooks as well is that so often the editors and Intellect we're obviously looking for people who are either seminal within the field or that they've made a really interesting and important contribution. So I mean, you're ticking those boxes for sure. But I also wanted to mention or ask you to talk a little bit about your own filmmaking and your own practice as well. Because you're not just a scholar, you're also a filmmaker. So, how does your creative practice inform your academic analysis when it comes to adult film, pornography, and media in general?
Thank you. Yeah, thank you for that question. So before becoming an academic, I had a previous career as a experimental video maker, and you know, uh, interestingly, or maybe not so surprising, my interest in video production, the same topics. I've been so obsessed with the same topics, throughout, my early 20s until, the present. And that's to do with, the questions around Asian American masculinity and sexual representation. Coming into porn as a academic discipline is not that different than, sort of the concerns that I was preoccupied with earlier in my artistic production. So, for example, an earlier work of mine was called Forever Bottom. Yeah, this is a 4-minute pseudo instructional video of me, so the model in the video getting fucked, bottoming in a variety of spaces, in the living room, in the shower, at the beach, at the park. But the thing is, you don't see anything. You just see my legs swinging in the air, right?
Right.
On these different locations. So it's all about mise en scène. It's all about cinematography, right? So
Yeah.
you see my face, you see my legs, but nothing else, right? You don't see my ass, you don't see any of the, the things that you expect to see. Yeah. So in that sense, my practice really feeds into as into the field of porn study. I came out during the AIDS era, like the height of the AIDS era, and this is in late 80s, early 90s. So I'm really dating myself now. So for me, sex and sexuality was something that was not to be taken lightly, or to be taken for granted, because as someone, a young person, a young gay male, Asian American person coming out at that time, gay sex were, intimately connected with disease and death, right? And danger, right? It's kind of like having sex or contracting HIV, right? Was sort of like a death sentence.
Yeah.
So for me, sex, is something that's it's a hard won accomplishment, right? Something that I don't take for granted even to this day in the prep era, right? Where you just take a pill and you're fine, right?
Yeah.
Um, yeah, so I mean, for me, it's very political, right? Porn studies, like sexual representation, is very political and something that is, has to be fought for and maintained and sustained over time. Yeah, so I think, yeah, yeah. So just to answer your question, you're just, very intimate connection between my practice and my scholarship. Yeah, especially in terms of, porn studies.
Excellent. Well, thank you so much for sharing that as well. And let's talk a little bit about the handbook in general. So the Intellect Handbook of Adult Film and Media, as I mentioned, it's kind of designed as like a reference work and a guide to the kind of discipline. But from your perspective, how would you describe the current state of adult film and pornography studies as an academic field? Because I just add to that by saying, I remember maybe when I started in the industry on my side, that is the publishing industry, maybe close to 20 years ago now. there was a lot of interest in pornography studies, but it was more in book form. And then, of course, there's been a few journals, and that obviously saw the field develop in new and innovative ways. And then I felt like there was quite a lot of internationalization and lots of different perspectives. But what's your take on that?
Yeah, I mean, it's been developing very, very slowly. Yeah. I would date, I mean, just to be very bold here, I would date the emergence of porn study as a field with the publication of Linda Williams' anthology called Porn Studies. Yeah.
Yeah.
In 2004, it came out of Duke University Press. And I was very privileged to have, my essay on Brandon Lee in that journal. I think this is where, I mean, this is ideal, as a young, graduate student, this is what you want, So, but yeah, but I do other things. Yeah, I write on Asian American film, I write on experimental film, but because of that volume, I've been very much attached to the field of porn studies and something that I'm proud of. I'm not, disavowing that by any means. Yeah, so you mentioned mid 2000 to the present, and I think it's becoming more and more visible as a field. Yeah, you mentioned there's journals. Of course, we have to point to uh, again Porn Studies Journal, right, coming out of the UK. Co-edited by Clarissa Smith and Fiona Atwood, John
Mhm.
Mercer, right, and I think it's becoming more visible, more important. For instance, the Intellect Handbook, that we're talking about today, a major, I think, really landmark publication for sure. All of my friends and respected colleagues are, either are the editors of the volume,
Yeah.
but also, throughout the book, like from different areas of my life, my yeah, as a scholar, young scholar now, I'm a older scholar. So that's really exciting, And in on Friday, I'm going to be participating in this double book launch. Okay, and
Yeah.
yeah, with this other volume published by Routledge last year called Screening Adult Cinema. Right, so
Mhm.
that volume is of course there's overlap with this one, but its focus is on individual texts. So they have each chapter is focused on a different film. So Deep Throat, Boys in the Sand, Behind the Green Door, etc. Whereas this volume it takes more of a historical, theoretical approach, right, to the field. And I think younger scholars, in spite of lots of challenges and obstacles, are gravitating towards the field, and it's not easy, right? I mean, I want to point to the backlash. I think we're all aware of the backlash, especially in this current political climate, especially in the United States, right,
Mm.
with Trump 2.0,
Yeah.
against sex, against sexuality, against DEI, against queer and trans people, and nevertheless, I mean, it's just really telling that the Intellect Handbook is coming out at this moment, right?
Yeah.
That we are not backing down, right? We are, yeah. So I think it's really important, and a lot of credit goes to Intellect, right, as a publishing, as a academic press, right, to be doing this at this moment. Yeah, so I think it's for many of us, it's a matter of life and death. It's not just an academic, like a fun thing to do or professional. Well, there isn't that much. Well, maybe for some people, you can get tenure, with this kind of material. But younger people, I'm thinking of like mentees and friends of mine, colleagues, Zihan Liu, who's doing really important work on queer Asian, BDSM. Yeah,
Mhm.
Emma Lydia Flannery is a colleague of mine who's doing really important work on Black sexuality, Black female sexuality. Jessica Hernandez, who is in the volume, writing about Latin XXXXX pornography.
Nice.
Yeah. So yeah, so I really want to advocate for younger scholars who are entering the field and really blowing it up and doing some really really important original scholarship.
Well, I'm very proud that we could publish this volume, and I'm really glad it's come to fruition at this moment, sort of politically. It's something that we've been looking to do for some time, but you have to get the right mix of people involved. So I'm really glad it's come out, and I'm really glad it's come out now. And like we're not backing down, and this is the type of this is the time when this kind of material is more pertinent than perhaps ever. Um, and I guess and normally it's just kind of topics like this that are the ones that are getting hounded by the more conservative elements of society. But anything remotely sort of liberal at the moment is being, or progressive is being hounded. So it's not like you're out in the wilderness on your own, is it either? So that kind of is an extra good time, I think, to be using topics like this to reassess and reaffirm. What is it about the kind of like handbook that you think might make it particularly useful for more early career or emerging scholars as kind of a reference point? Do you think it is that diversity of content in there? Because it's not like a boring kind of textbook, is it? Where it's like, well, here's this classic and here's this moment. It really does break new ground and have a lot of diverse perspectives and voices.
For sure, yeah, and I think the volume begins with the sections on histories of the different histories. This is in the plural of adult film and media. Um, so I think that's very important and very useful, right, for younger scholar who are interested in entering the field. But speaking more personally, the most exciting sections in the volume for me is the one on area studies and transnationalism. Yeah,
Yeah.
I wish I had, access to this material when I was, a young scholar, back in the early 2000s. So, this section includes, chapters on East Asian pornographies, Southeast Asian, South Asian, as well as Latinx, as well as African pornography, which is, something I didn't even know about, until recently, and I don't know this material, so I'm very eager, even though I'm in the volume, a lot of the material is new to me. So for me, that's really exciting. And in addition, you also, one also finds chapters on queer crip pornographies,
Yeah.
trans pornographies. So it's really deep dive, yeah, into the field. So I'm really excited about that.
Brilliant. And again, very relevant right now to
Yeah.
to issues and identities and topics and things that are, you know, so it's not, yeah, I think it's nice that it's not just this kind of looking back to what's been established. It definitely is engaging with current debates and things of that nature too. So your chapter surveys gay pornography as both a cultural form and a sort of scholarly field. What would you say, if there is one, is the central thesis or kind of intervention in your own chapter? What's the kind of the main aim, scope, thesis?
Sure. Well, there are two things, I want to highlight, for folks who are who are interested in my chapter. The first is I want to emphasize the fact of the history of gay male pornography. I want to yeah, to make sure that it's gay male, yeah, it's not just gay in general, or yeah, yeah, so gay male pornography as a an archive of abundance. Okay, so this is how the chapter begins. I think this is one of the I guess central points I want to make, with this chapter. 'Cause commonly, in the popular culture, right, one often finds, complaints or analysis, about LGBTQ representation. That's all about absence, about
Mm,
lack, right, about like underrepresentation. So, I'm drawing on, different kinds of scholarship, different, people like Jeffrey Escoffier, people like Lucas Hildebrand, people like Ryan Powell have written, about porn as, there's a sense of abundance in gay male cultures from the late 60s into the 70s, into the 80s, as, there was a lot of it. Yeah. Even going into the AIDS years, in the 80s and 90s, people did not stop making porn or watching porn, consuming porn, buying porn. So, for example, like in the early days of gay liberation, in terms of, let's say newspapers, one would find ads for, gay films, meaning gay porn films, alongside ads for, gay consciousness raising groups, so gay porn was very much central to gay male cultures, right? It was not something that was a niche or something that was shameful, something that, one has to like, wear a raincoat and go to an adult bookstore in the industrial part of town, and, it was none of that. It was very much part of gay male, culture, right? Above ground. Gay film festivals, we think of gay film festivals, these days as, like feature films and documentaries and experimental films. Whereas in the early days, in the 70s, gay films denoted gay porn films. So why is this important? It's important because gay porn is really the primary place where one witnesses, observes gay men, right? Gay people existing, right?
Yeah.
And not just that, but being, getting off, being experiencing pleasure, experiencing joy, with their
Yeah.
body. There's no shame about it. People are laughing. They're crying out of pain slash, pleasure, right? Okay, so the second thing I want to emphasize, and this is it sort of like closes uh, my chapter, is the concept of porn temporality, yeah,
Mhm.
time, yeah, is something that I want to highlight as well. For example, in the chapter, I trace, the different ways that time has been conceptualized in the different on the subgenres of gay pornography. We have the anticipatory mode of the cock tease in physique magazines, right? So, one could not show, a frontal nudity, so there was like they were wearing like you know, what is it called? They're posing straps. I think that's what they.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
right. And then we have the protracted time of the cruise in 70s porn. Like people walking around like for like 5 or 6 minutes, cruising one another.
Yeah.
Nothing
Yeah.
happens. I mean, not, no sex actually happens, just the cruise. We have the
Yeah.
in the 80s we have the protracted time of the condom, right? So I mean, when condom was adopted in gay porn, you see them, like, kissing, making out, and then all of a sudden, erect penises, and all of a sudden, next shot, you see the penis enveloped in a condom, right? So they cut
Right.
out, the tearing off the condom, putting it on, right? Magically, the condom appears, and then after, the performers, climax, the condom magically disappear. So I want to I talk about that as well. And then, in the contemporary moment, we have the concentrated and distracted attention span of, online consumptions of, these clips, right? It's no longer the entire narrative, like, 80 to 90 minutes. Now we're watching like 5 minutes, right? Yeah, 8 minutes, clips, right? So and people are always looking for the next clip, right? The hotter clip.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. So which leads to, my and, the thing is, my chapter is not just about celebrating gay porn, even though, that's my primary perspective, but also, being critical of it at the same time. And how does that come, how does that appear in time in terms of gay porn? I see it as this, what I call a stubborn presentism, right? The emphasis on the present, right? And I think, this is troubling. I think we need to, like, submit it to interrogation. For example, as I mentioned, this preoccupation of the latest, the newest, right? The current hottest faces, the buffiest bodies, the next kinks or taboos, right? In these sexual scenarios. But at the same time, we actually we're getting more and more of the same.
Mm.
People are not interested in the past. What happened in the 60s or the 70s or the 80s, even the 90s. It's considered to be vintage porn.
Right.
So like meaning that it's, say pre-condom porn, right, bareback porn. But people are not no longer interested. They're interested in what is producing this week, right? Even last week's porn is something that is, sort of like, oh, not so exciting. So I mean, you can disagree with me, but this is where,
No, I was just
yeah,
interested to say if you thought, do you find that to be something that's more unique to gay porn, the kind of porn that you analyze,
right.
or do you think that's just more of a sexual imagery, any kind of pornography, and any kind of consumer, just in line with the fact that
Oh,
we want our our dopamine hit and our other
Yeah, yeah,
gratifications
yeah,
incredibly quickly these days. And like you
yeah,
say, I
yeah.
think you might be generous, 5 minutes, 8 minutes for a clip. I don't know if people are looking for the next
Or
one.
like two, yeah,
More like,
three.
and,
Right.
and of
No,
course,
yeah, yeah,
I know, and I know that there are other chapters in the volume which will deal with that more
yeah,
specifically, and
yeah,
how technology is affecting
yeah.
consumption and things of those
Right.
that nature. But do you find that the sort of the kind of pornography that you study is kind of unique in any way to other mass consumed pornographies?
You know what? I would have to do more research in terms of looking at straight pornography too, in order to do a
Yeah,
comparison. But just to from what I've been exposed to, academically, scholarly, but also just in everyday life, I would say maybe it's a phenomenon of male sexuality,
yeah.
straight
That
and gay. Yeah,
that
when
sounds
yeah,
familiar.
right. So men always wanting, yeah, more and more. But then, in the end, we all have this experience of falling down the rabbit hole. When you're clicking, you're looking for the better, sexier, more, yeah, more interesting, more exciting, and basically we're getting more and more of the same, right? So I
Right.
think that's yeah something that is very present in gay porn, and you're suggesting, yeah, and I'm speculating most probably straight porn as well.
Well, that's the kind of, well, I'm glad I can pose a question for you to consider in your next research project. And but also, I think that yeah, the handbook itself will definitely deal with questions adjacent to that. How about when it comes to, well, actually, I guess let me just follow up on that last question and just say at the beginning of it, it did sound a lot like you're saying that gay pornography has played a really important role, not just in sexuality, but in queer visibility in general, especially around gay men, um, and identity formation, community building, and a lot of positive things. And you mentioned joy as well, and probably joy as an act of resistance. So it sounds like there's a lot more to like gay porn, especially than what people might initially think.
Right.
Cool. Okay. Well, thank you for answering that one. I think that's it's nice to have a bit of a positive light on things as well, and nice to see things being celebrated in that kind of way. But I can imagine at the same time, pornography itself poses some challenges still, even in this day, especially in this political situation, of course, as well as an object of study. So, how did you approach it methodologically and sort of institutionally? What sources and archives did you draw upon for your own chapter, or was that pretty straightforward? You just, did you find there were any barriers or any issues that you had to sort of overcome?
You know what? I think, at this moment, I was writing this, I think 2 years ago when I started
Right.
writing this chapter. I would say, I've been really lucky to be, writing, engaging in this material at this, like, well, 2 years ago, in this moment, yeah, because I was able to draw on, the scholarship that's being produced very recently. For example, John Mercer's book, Gay Pornography, uh, Jeff Escoffier book that just came out. I don't have the title off the
Yeah, I
top of
think I
my
know what you
head.
mean.
Yeah, very important, a scholar, his book just came out a few years ago. And, also earlier stuff, John Berger's book, One-Handed History was really, very helpful. Yeah, so, drawing on work that, benefiting from, the labor, right? The intellectual labor, right? Contribution of people who've come before me, so I think that's important. I'm not inventing the wheel, reinventing the wheel, I mean. Um, so in terms of archive, there is no porn archive, like a physical space, because as we know, porn is so stigmatized, right, in our society, even in 2026, right, in this very sex negative society,
Yep.
North America, Euro America. So I've had to do other find my objects in other ways. I'll just be very explicit about it. Torrent sites, have been very useful. I think it's sort of like gossip, digital gossip where folks are uploading, right, material that's hard to find material to share, right? This is about like, unofficial knowledge sharing, right? Sort of mutual aid in terms of porn material that you cannot find anywhere else. So you're not going to go into a library and find it, right? You're not going to go into an adult bookstore and find this material, right? Because bookstores tend to carry only contemporary stuff, right?
Yeah.
So yeah, I've had to go, kind of convoluted ways to find my objects. Have going through my own collection, let's say VHS tapes, but then have to track down the VCR, very hard to find these days, right?
Yeah.
Digitizing the VHS tape, say at the public library, and then looking at the material, right, over and over again. So yeah, I think it's challenging, but also for me, it's a good kind of challenge, and it's also fun, in terms of following these leads, and discovering something new, that I haven't seen before, and sharing that with other people, with students, with readers, and so on.
It's interesting you said public library just because I had an interesting situation recently that kind of changed my perspective on, I guess, reception and viewing studies. I had to go to a particular public library in North America and print some materials before I went to a conference the next day to speak. And my hotel, they wouldn't do it to the high enough standard. La la la. I went to the public library, and you're in a bay of all these computers. 9 p.m. around that, and I go and sit down, and I'm like, "What's going on over there?" And I have a little look, and like not one, but maybe I don't know, maybe four or five of the other users were all just watching pornography in the library, and I
Great.
kind of figured that they would have like maybe some kind of draconian tracking block systems or something.
Yeah,
But I
yeah,
was just quite taken. I was like, oh, so this is the way to get cheap access to pornography these days. Just hit up the public library, use that library card. So although they didn't have some of those resources in their stacks, they certainly were people were consuming live there while I was trying to print up some flyers. So yeah, it gave me a little bit of a moment of pause. I was like, oh, I didn't realize this was where a lot of the reception was happening these days. So
that's
so
fantastic.
the
That's great.
library replays more than one important role.
Right.
um, well, I did just have one final question for you today because I really appreciate your time and I know you're a very, very busy person. But that really was if you had any advice, because of, as we've said, this isn't necessarily the easiest topic to research for various reasons, including like lack of access. So what advice would you give to any emerging scholars who want to work on maybe pornography, queer media, or
Right.
sexuality in their research more generally? Any top tips?
Well, I think the first tip I would give would be believe in your work. Yeah. Because I think, well, just to be very explicit about it, um, expect, right, and be prepared for pushback. Yeah. Sex makes many people uncomfortable. Yeah. And I think even in, let's say, what one would assume to be, sex positive, uh, um, environments, such as, let's say, gender sexuality studies, programs, or conferences, or that kind of thing. People, are very comfortable, fine with talking about sexuality, but when it comes to sex, right, sex acts, bodies,
Mm,
right, fluids, that kind of thing, yeah, people do not want to talk about it, or it makes them very uncomfortable, and they find all sorts of ways to avoid it. But not only that, they'll find ways to dismiss your work, belittle your work, marginalize your work as, not serious scholarship, right?
mhm.
I've encountered this in my own, sort of, journey, right, in different ways, and I didn't realize it until after the fact. Oh, that was what was happening. I'll just give a very quick example. I made a flyer for a class called Sex on Screen, for my university here. With my art background, I worked on it really hard. What I did was that I just took screenshots of people's faces, from different films, that we'll be studying in class. Andy Warhol's Blowjob,
Mhm.
it's just a man's face, right? For 40 minutes, supposedly getting a blowjob off screen. A face of the female character in Short Bus, the face of Hedy Lamarr in Ecstasy,
Oh yeah.
so submitted it to my department, and they came back and said, "Oh, we can't use this. We can't circulate this." But even though it's just images of people's face,
It yeah.
Yeah. So for them, it's like, no. So they came back with, a generic flyer of like buildings, I'm serious. They're just buildings, different buildings. It could have been the class could have been like screening architecture, instead of sex, instead of screening sex. Yeah, so I mean there are different, ways. Okay, so getting back to your question, younger scholar should be prepared, right? To experience these kinds of, pushback and resistance. But, I encourage them to reach out to, older folks like me who's, gone through, these similar processes and just get support. I do get a number of emails from just younger scholars out of the blue, from other university, asking to talk with me. I've done, used to be telephone calls, now it's Zoom, so I think that's important to reach out, form your own network and your own communities, because, where you are at in your individual institution, chances are you'll be the only one, doing this stuff. And you should believe in your work, and yeah, so that I'll end with that. Yeah,
Well, I think you made some very, very powerful points there, but also some really a couple of nuggets there to just be drawn upon. And obviously, I'm not a researcher. I'm a publisher, and I don't research pornography, but I do attend a lot of conferences where pornography and adult film are certainly areas under discussion, and they may well have like a whole area or a special interest group. And even if it's like not a big conference, there's often a special interest group or a sub area that is specifically focused on that. And attending one of those conferences is a great way to meet people doing innovative work within your field. And I
right,
think that idea of building a community, whether it be something that's slightly marginalized or stigmatized, whatever that might be, I think finding that group and finding collaborators, and just to realize you might be the only person at your institution,
right.
but there's certainly a wealth and depth of people researching across the world, and that's the way really to kind of improve your opportunities as well as your experience, I think. So I think conferences and events, whether they be virtual or of course preferably in person, even if it's not a pornography studies event, or it's not like something like specific, there's probably a special interest group that's affiliated. I'm thinking things like the Popular Culture Association,
Mm,
probably Society for Cinema and Media Studies,
yeah,
smaller international organizations. There's plenty of them. Anything to do with communication, media, there's almost certainly going to be some group. And of course, the more people that attend and the more people that support those groups, the more likely they are to have their own conferences and bigger topics will be developed. So I think that's some great advice, finding a community, believing in your own work, and then also, just ensuring that you are publishing in like peer-reviewed journals
yeah,
and quality publications, to make sure that no one can, say, oh, well, you that's not a proper journal, that's not proper, that kind of thing.
right.
The people are often quick to diminish your work. So if you can ensure that it's being published in a reputable way, then that's going to give you a strong opportunity to, to be like, I don't think so, sir. I don't think so, sir. But
Yeah,
anyway, my friend, thank you so much for your time today. It's been an absolute pleasure. If anyone's interested in finding out more about this chapter on gay pornography specifically, or just anything about adult film and media, I'd urge them to go to www.intellectbooks.com. Check out the Intellect Handbook of Adult Film and Media. It's also very easy to get a hold of from our partners at the University of Chicago Press website too. And if you're interested in teaching topics from the book, it is possible to order a desk copy, so do consider that. And of course, you can always just buy a copy for yourself as well. We're also looking at different ways to disseminate the content. So there's a lot of different ways to access it. But for now, the most obvious ways are to go to Intellect Books or the University of Chicago Press and either request a desk copy, a review copy, or to purchase one then and there for yourself. I'd also just everyone should do a deep dive on this topic and just see what else is out there. And of course, maybe start with A View from the Bottom. But Professor, thanks so much for your time today.
yeah.
It's been wonderful. Any final thoughts from you?
Yeah, no, that was fantastic, James. I really appreciate it.